That appears to be me live in both areas. So that was the wrong button, wasn't it? That appears to be me live in both areas. So that was the wrong button, wasn't it? Right, I am satisfied that everything is working, so without further ado, let us just get into this live stream. Still new to all of this rigmarole. Right, I am satisfied. I muted myself again by accident. No, I have not, thank goodness. Right, I'm still new to all of this. And switch to that, and we are ready to go. Hello, whoever the hell is watching this. This is my 5th live stream to this channel. And it's been a little while since the last one because I needed to work on a few bits and pieces here and there outside of everything, but it all appears to be working fine in terms of tech. Still getting used to this and what have you, but without further ado, let us begin, I guess. So if you're new here, this is my progress on my big modded Minecraft live streaming world, and what I have got of it done so far. Basically before this one, obviously with this being stream 5, I have done a little bit of work obviously before this kind of semi comeback stream, and that is very, very loud. I can tell it's been a while. But there are several bits in this world that I would like to get done today, namely a few bits and pieces that will help with all of the builds and stuff that I will eventually be making in this world, as this is going to be a city world as I have planned out. Grab all of that, and I do have a mine. That is fantastic because I'm going to be wanting to get more of those guys today, which I do not have very many of at the moment. Let's see. That's the page I want to be on. So today I would like to make a pulverizer into a sieve, for priority today. I already have a Stirling generator in the world, which is going to be good, and I also would like to source some spruce saplings for more builds in this world and try and make a mining turtle as well, which is going to be quite important for clearing out areas and stuff in this world, because all of this I have in front of me is where my, or at least part of my main base is going to go. So to get this started for a clip slash short onto YouTube, let's just stack up here and forget those made burps. Make that short, or whatever you want to call it, from what I have written down here. This is taken at the start of my 5th live stream of my Modded World series. To recap from the first 4, I have started to set down the foundations of one of the sections of my base in a 3x4 area of the spawn chunks. Up to about, I want to say, stream 9 or 10 or so, I hope to continue working on bits of the technical side of it so I can have several blocks and resources to start building parts of the city that I have planned. Since the last live stream, I have since added Mr. Crayfish's furniture mod and another food additions mod since stream 4. Which will help me to kind of further expand the feel of the world that I am going for. So I am muted on that. Nope, I was unmuted on that. Okay, that's good. Let's try that one more time, because I think without the modded descriptions and what have you, at the end of that, I think that worked quite well. Having it written down as well on my notebook as well works very well for myself, so that's good to know. So let us start that again. We'll try that again. This is taken at the start of my 5th live stream of my Modded World series. This is taken at the start of my 5th live stream of my Modded World series. To recap from the first 4, I've started to set down the foundations of one of the sections of my base in a 3x4 area of the spawn chunks. Up to about stream 9 or 10, or round about that, I hope to continue working on bits of the technical side of it so I can have several blocks and resources to start building parts of the city that I have planned. I think that one works out well. Okay, and that was a Discord notification. Why do I have... Why the hell was there a Discord notification? I've no idea. I'm already getting haunted by ghosts instead of ahead of the the ghost stories that I will be talking about in this stream. And that's all still running fine, right. So make our way down and sleep. So instead of prioritizing the sieve and pulverizer, as I mentioned, I think I'm actually already got glass there. That's fantastic. I'm going to actually prioritize a turtle, digging turtle for the world here, because I feel like that's going to be quite an important part of me getting resources and what have you in this world, and it will help me clear out this base area as well, as I want to have this to be multiple levels. I have decided. Because admittedly on the last live stream I kind of messed up in the way in that I built this path here, which is going to be the only path I'll be walking down in my base, to orientated to the right there, and I actually meant to build it to the left, so I'm going to need to fix that as well. And this needs to be too wide here as well, I have decided, so that's going to be one of the things that I need to fix in this world at some point, or will fix at some point soon in this world here. But I couldn't remember or not since the last live stream if I had a little digging tunnel or kind of a strip mine, but I do, which is good, because getting diamonds is going to be kind of one of those things that I'm going to prioritize in today's stream, to try and get enough diamonds so I can get a mining turtle to dig out more layers on this world. For the people that are tuning in for the first time, I have lower that down even more. Can't remember if I mentioned this in my previous live streams, but I have effectively pre-built the big base which I've started to make in a creative world upstairs. The whole kind of layout and what have you I've already kind of predetermined and what have you in a creative world already. So it's just going to be a matter of implementing that into this world over due time. But I'm going to have to make some adjustments to it and what have you, because of size changes I mentioned there at the start, and also to fit in a few other bits and pieces. But at the end of the day, guess really that was just me in my test world kind of figuring things out for this live stream world, seeing what needs to go where and having kind of a solid kind of plan going into this streaming adventure that I want to try and do and have go places for me, hopefully, because I would rather be doing this than working with the public for the rest of my life. But I guess that's a good thing that I have all of this. Well, it is a good thing that I have all of this planned out, so I kind of just know where to go with it and what have you. So, as previously talked about in the live streams and what have you. I've talked a lot about this chap called M.R. James in the majority of the live streams before this one. And M.R. James was basically a ghost stories author, not by profession, but he's generally known today as being one of the most well-respected, if not the most well-respected, ghost stories author of all time, and is probably coming on to being my favourite author of all time. How I kind of found out about him was through television, because I used to be really, really nuts about Doctor Who and what have you for most of my life, but since the fandom is kind of getting worse in more ways than one with Doctor Who and what have you, I kind of slowly but surely decided to branch out into other things and what have you in the due course of exploring things, and I ended up looking into a lifelong fascination of ghost stories. Thought that was diamonds for a moment, and ended up digging back into a lifelong obsession I've had with ghost stories. Well, not necessarily ghost stories in particular, but this general subject matter of ghosts, which is not sure why it interests me so much at the moment. I just find it such a fascinating subject. Maybe there's another thing for me to kind of discuss in a future live stream. But anyways, I decided to branch out from Doctor Who, and in turn started looking more into other television shows and what have you outside of Doctor Who. And in turn I looked up what were the most well-regarded pieces of like ghost story television, and I ended up coming across in turn the 1976 BBC adaptation of the Charles Dickens story The Signalman, which was made and produced as a part of BBC's A Ghost Story for Christmas television series, which has since gone on to become my favourite TV series of all time in due course, with The Signalman also becoming my absolute favourite piece of entertainment media. So that was the first episode of that show that I ended up watching, and from there kind of branched out and decided to check out the rest of this series. The Ghost Stories for Christmas TV series was basically, or is rather, because it's still ongoing in a new form, basically an emulation of the kind of British tradition of telling ghost stories at Christmas time. And and this was basically, as I think I just said, kind of brain farted there, kind of the BBC doing a television replication of this tradition of telling ghost stories at Christmas, but through the medium of television. And the majority of the adaptations here by the BBC in this series, which were and still are adaptations of the author M.R. James, which is how I found out about his stories and what have you. And in the original run of A Ghost Stories for Christmas, there was 5 adaptations of his stories total, and then they overall kind of became my first, or at least some of them kind of became my first big kind of exposure to this guy and his stories. I had at one point before picked up a collection of his ghost stories in a charity bookshop, not really knowing who he is, and kind of knowing that would be my start of him becoming my favourite author of all time, most likely. It was just something that I saw in that shop there and thought it looked interesting and decided to buy it just out of randomness. And I ended up reading a few stories from it, but I didn't ended up reading the whole book. And the only one out of that particular edition of his stories that I remember from that section of my kind of introduction to M.R. James was Room 13, which is a fascinating story about basically a haunted hotel room or motel room to do with the unlucky number 13. And it's an absolutely fantastic story, and one that I still love to this day. There has been many television adaptations of M.R. James's work over the years. The earliest and the most notable and earliest ones came by way of a 1960s TV series called Mystery and Imagination from 1966, which ended up adapting 4 of his stories in the overall progression of this series, but unfortunately due to practices with the videotapes and what the episodes were made on at the time, none of these episodes unfortunately are watchable today, but 3 have survived in terms of audio only recordings thanks to a fan who recorded them this way, audio only, at the time of the broadcasts. And those are available on YouTube to listen to, and a clip from the 4th and last one was uncovered quite a while ago now, but there's a small video clip of that one which exists as a part of, I think, like some kind of promotional thing the TV station was airing at the time. So that's still viewable and watchable, which is good, but unfortunately we cannot view these episodes in the original way that they were produced. And they would be at the top of, or pretty much at the top of my most wanted pieces of lost media to be found, as I'm in a M.R. James group online, and you have several people in that group who are much older than I am and were fortunate enough to have actually watched these episodes on broadcast, and you can see them kind of posting their memories of the show today, and it's really fascinating and what have you to view those kind of memories and what have you by these people fortunate enough to have seen the episodes on broadcast. I'm aware that a television preservation company called Kaleidoscope is coming out with a DVD at some point this year, which is the audio tracks of 6 otherwise missing episodes of Mystery and Imagination on DVD, along with the clip of that M.R. James adaptation, along with a video clip and audio recordings of other lost episodes from a completely different show called Public Eye, at some point this year, which I'm going to be adding to my collection whenever that comes out. But the 4 adaptations that were produced at that time in that particular TV show were Lost Hearts, The Tractate Middoth, Room 13, and Casting the Runes, all of which have subsequently been adapted again in other iterations and what have you of television. The first 3 of which got eventually got adapted again, but as episodes of A Ghost Story for Christmas. And then Casting the Runes didn't get adapted as an episode of A Ghost Story for Christmas, or at least it hasn't been yet, because I am aware that Mark Gatiss, who makes the newer episodes of the show, would like to do an adaptation of Casting the Runes, but that has not surfaced yet. But the director of the majority of the Ghost Story for Christmas episodes of the 70s himself directed an adaptation of Casting the Runes, not as a part of that series, but as a part of a completely different series later on in the 70s. And that's not the best one in the world, but it's still quite interesting. But overall, it's interesting kind of point and what have you to be kind of brought up in the general kind of overall collection and discussion about M.R. James and what have you. Because a lot of people who were fortunate enough to watch the adaptations in the 60s as a part of the Mystery and Imagination TV series compared the Ghost Stories for Christmas ones unfavourably to the Mystery and Imagination ones, saying that these older 1960s ones were far scarier and what have you than what the Ghost Stories for Christmas ones offered up. So it's interesting for me because as I said, A Ghost Story for Christmas is my favourite TV series of all time, and it's interesting to think that possibly out there I may be able to see, if a miracle of lost media recovery happens, I may be able to see basically more episodes of this show, but they're like scarier versions of some of my absolute favourite episodes of television. You know, it's a really interesting and kind of fascinating concept to think about it in that kind of lens and way, and it would be really interesting to kind of see all of those kind of adaptations produced in that series to come back in some way, because there was 18 episodes overall in this particular era of Mystery and Imagination, all but 2 of which, none of the M.R. James ones, are missing from the television archives, unfortunately, because of tape practices, as I mentioned. And there's some really interesting stuff that was produced back then in that series, and some things that would be really interesting to see recovered and what have you from that series. Like the M.L. James adaptations as a part of that series were the kind of most acclaimed and popular episodes of that series, but the general runner-up to what was the most popular one was a adaptation of a vampire story called Carmilla by an author called Sheridan Lethurnow, the original story of which I read last year and was absolutely fantastic, which is, I guess, another reason why I want to see this particular version recovered. But it was apparently an absolutely terrifying piece of television, like the majority of the adaptations, like the majority of the episodes in this particular series were. Really interesting story as well. It's basically a vampire story that's kind of predates Dracula by originally predated Dracula, the publication of this particular story, by several years. I think at least 15 years, I want to say, which is really interesting. And whereas not overly explicit, if you wanted a supernatural story to read this Pride Month, then I can recommend Carmilla, because whereas it's not overly explicit in these ways, there are lesbian undertones and themes in the story between our human female main character and the female main character, or female vampire main character. Did I word that right? But yeah, so there's that if you wanted a vampire story to read during Pride Month for whatever reason. But yeah. Is that diamonds? No, that's silver. That looked a lot like diamonds there. We do go exploring that way and that way. But it's just a general big shame that none of these particular episodes exist in the television archives anymore and aren't available for nerds like me to watch for various reasons. And I believe, yeah, I detailed more of this in my first live stream to this. There they are, brilliant, found them. And I detailed that in the first, well, there's quite a few here, live stream to this channel. Yay, found them. I know I'm not using fortune, I don't care. Right, that's fantastic. That's one of the big things ticked off my list. How many was that actually? That was 10. Wow, it's not bad. Probably could have gone a lot more with fortune, but don't have fortune at this current point in the world. So yes, overall Mystery and Imagination was a really popular television series for the time it came out, and is still kind of resonating with people online, as it were. Nope, that's not what I meant to do, bugger. Right. But then that obviously wasn't quite it for M.R. James adaptations on television and even in the 1960s, because fortunately after this point we do have a load more M.R. James adaptations, and thankfully ones that all do exist in the television archives. The first of these to exist in the archive was produced not too long after the last Mystery and Imagination M.R. James adaptation, which was Casting the Runes in 1968. 6 weeks after its broadcast, the BBC screened a adaptation of the M.R. James story called "Oh Whistle and I Will Come to You, My Lad" in a documentary TV series called Omnibus, which was an unusual choice at the time from what I have read, and to my kind of academical knowledge of M.R. James adaptations and these kind of TV episodes that I'm kind of been wittering on about in my past live streams and what have you. Let's see here, then do that. So this is another thing that I'm doing in my world. I'm not going to be using or aim to not use like time accelerator things that will enhance the growth of things around here quickly. I actually may do that in the future, but for now I've kind of had the idea of just large patches of growing trees to be harvested by generators, because the more trees there are, the higher chance there is for one to grow, you know. But after that Mystery and Imagination adaptation of Casting the Runes was produced, the BBC released the 1968 black and white version of Whistle and I Will Come to You, My Lad, another M.R. James adaptation, and the director of many of the, or the majority of the 1970s A Ghost Story for Christmas television episodes, Lawrence Gordon Clark, was inspired by this one to create the Ghost Stories for Christmas television series, which ran from 1971 to 1978 and clocked up 8 episodes total. So the first 5 of these were all adaptations of M.R. James stories, not Casting the Runes, Stalls of Barchester, The Warning to the Curious, Lost Hearts, The Treasure of Abbot Thomas, and The Ash Tree. Then the 6th one was the 1976 adaptation of The Signalman. So yeah, that done. And then after that, I think possibly because of struggles of getting more adaptations done and fears of the costs of them, it was decided to do 2 original stories instead of adaptations of pre-existing, 2 original scripts instead of adaptations of pre-existing literature, basically. And the result of that was 2 original scripts, one called Stigma from 1977, which was directed by Lawrence Gordon Clark again, and then another one which ended up being the last episode of the original run, The Ice House in 1978, which was directed by, I think, David Lidster, I think his name was, because I believe what happened was that there was one constant producer as well as director throughout a majority of the run of Ghost Stories for Christmas when Lawrence Gordon Clark was directing it, and then a new producer was assigned to the task, and then Lawrence Gordon Clark didn't get on well with this new producer or something like that, and then he decided to leave after directing started to leave the series after having made the Stigma film, which resulted in the necessity for somebody else to direct the Ice House film in 1978, which ended up going to Derek Lidster, I think his name is, as I mentioned. But then, whereas the M.R. James adaptations and the Charles Dickens one were absolutely praised, the critical reception to the two original stories was decidedly more critical, as it's put on Wikipedia. See here, so that goes over there, so I think I might as well. Yeah, that will be fine. And then the BBC ended up cancelling the series in after the Ice House film because of the critical reception that it had. How am I doing wrong here? It's been a while since I've used one of these things. Actually, I spelled that wrong, didn't I? There we go. And that will slowly dig out that chunk, so that's absolutely fantastic. But no, the BBC ended up cancelling this series in 1978 because of the negative critical reception that happened to the two films, I believe. And I'm assuming that the departure of Lawrence Gordon Clark kind of maybe played a part in it as well, but it was probably mainly the critical reception being quite negative towards the two original stories that led to the BBC's decision on cancelling the series back then. But eventually it did get revived in 2005, where an adaptation of James's A View from a Hill story happened, and then another one of Room 13 appeared the following year in 2006, but for quite a time after that there was no more. And the modern series has generally been okay more recently in terms of adhering to the annual kind of schedule, but in some points in its early tenure it wasn't so good with that, and that's actually going to muck up him if I go out of range, isn't it? Yeah. Oh, it's digging underneath as well, that's interesting, but that's be okay. So after those two in the mid-2000s, another adaptation of Whistle and I Will Come to You appeared in 2010. actually. Oh wow, he's used a lot of charcoal already. He will return soon if I remove that. That's fine. And then Mark Gatiss came onto the scene in 2013 with an adaptation of the Tractate Middif, kind of completing the remakes of the Mystery and Imagination episodes, as it were. And then since then he has produced more adaptations of M.R. James as a part of the series, and a few other different episodes of the series, such as an adaptation of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's Lot 249 a couple years ago. Most recently, a adaptation of Edith Nesbit's Man-Size in Marble in 2024, and he also produced a original script called The Dead Room as well at one point, which I think was in when was that one? No, that was 2018, because there was a big gap in between the Tractate Middif and his and that particular film. But yeah, be right back. And I am back. But no, I've really kind of rambled on, haven't I? And I haven't even gotten to the main thing mentioned in this live stream as per the overlay of the live stream, which is the first 1970s film of A Ghost Story for Christmas, which is the adaptation of The Stalls of Barchester by Lawrence Gordon Clark. Take that out as well. Find a few straggling spiders would be nice. Actually, have I been playing in peace? I have been playing in peaceful the whole time. I am an idiot. Right. That's why I haven't seen any monsters yet. It's because of creative worlds and what have you. But anyways, I digress. Okay, you are going back. There's a spider over here apparently. No, he's underground. Okay. But I'm looking for spiders at the moment. But no, the first adaptation of the main series of Ghost Stories for Christmas was The Stalls of Barchester, in 1971, and the basic plot to this story is that a archdeacon of the Barchester Cathedral has a mysterious death, and framing elements are used whereby a Dr. Black, as played by Clive Swift, is kind of investigating this, and it kind of unravels that, and through this kind of framing device, the main story of the Archdeacon Haynes, as played by is it something Hardy? Tom Hardy? No, that's Bane. Why did I say that? Played by a popular actor at the time, that name's escaping me right now. And was it Desert Temple? Kind of showing what led to his death and what have you, where basically he becomes and kind of leads up to his death, and shows kind of things leading up to his unusual death. And it turns out that the stalls that he sits at in the particular cathedral have wood carvings on them that are so happen to be made from the wood of a old cursed tree in which there were hangings and what have you performed upon it. And the carvings kind of manifest in various ways to black. And so like one of the carvings is like a figure of the Grim Reaper or Death, and that actually manifests and spoiler alert, ends up killing him at the end of the episode. And there's another interesting manifestation as seen, which is this manifestation of this black cat, as there is a carving of a cat on the cathedral stall, and that kind of manifests and kind of freaks him out in his residency, as we see in the film. Since it was transmitted, actually let me go back a bit, and an interesting kind of change there was to this particular, in terms of the adaptation getting made and what have you. In terms of the adaptation itself getting made, there's one kind of interesting and big change to it and what have you, as per from the original text version of the story by M.R. James, in that I believe in the original story, which I have read once but I've kind of rebriefed myself on at the start of this stream, was that there was only one major bit of paranormal activity or haunting present in the original story, which was the manifestations and curses present in the TV film, with the kind of carvings and what have you kind of manifesting and menacing Dr. Black. But there's an addition in the TV film that wasn't in the original text version, in that the character of Dr. Portney, or Putney, I think he's called, who dies at the start of the film and probably at the start of the story. Let's do that. In that it's implied that his ghost comes back and starts haunting the residency in which he died, which also happens to be the residency of our main character, Dr. Black. Which is interesting, and there's some really interesting and spooky moments in it that I'm assuming is the haunting kind of that character on Dr. Black in the progression of the film, such as this strange kind of presence Dr. Black feels in his residency, which could be the presence of the wood carvings manifesting to menace him, possibly. But there's whispers of its kind of unseen character saying good evening, sleep well, I believe, in the film as well, which I'm assuming and interpreting is a manifestation of the Putney or Portney ghost, or however you say that character's particular name. That's not the wood plank I wanted, but okay. So that goes. But no, it's a really interesting kind of addition, and it kind of helps to add to the ghost story kind of aspect, what have you, and kind of helps enhance the piece quite a bit, I would have said. Let's do that. But since the broadcast of this particular installment has been praised and has been seen as a strong opening film for the overall series, and there's a lot of mobs over there, and has received praise, and I myself have seen it I think a total of 6 times now, because I've been keeping a track of how many times I've watched these films, because I am like that and I've decided to do that, because I find that kind of interesting, and it is my favourite series of all time. So it's interesting for me to kind of keep a track of it like so. But yeah, overall, the original 8 episode run of A Ghost Story for Christmas would cover a lot of different kind of bases and what have you, such as the Stalls of Barchester and Lost Hearts, I would say, are kind of in the territory of haunted houses, I would have said. Haunted house type of stories. Whereas Warning to the Curious and The Treasure of Abbot Thomas are about finding ancient treasures and unleashing supernatural forces in turn. Whereas The Signalman is can be viewed in a couple different ways as a story of a haunted railway. What did this called go off there? Can be viewed as a haunted railway or the effects of one man's isolation on their own psyche and what have you, which is still to this day my favourite episode of the series. And I could probably go over that entire episode in one stream and just talk about why I love it so much. But then the interesting bit about it, whereas those are more definitely in the lines of ghost stories and supernatural horror, the last three kind of cover more different grounds for the series, I would have said. Namely the ash tree, stigma and the ice house, whereas definitely the first two have elements of the ghost story in them. They're more kind of generally I would generally view them more as pieces of folk horror rather than full-blown pieces of supernatural horror and ghost story television, I would have said. And it's very much a topic that I could discuss in another stream, but with Jesus, that loud. But it's very much a topic that I can very much cover in a completely full and different stream. It's interesting for me that this series kind of traverses the lines of supernatural horror and kind of traverses multiple areas of the supernatural horror genre, and kind of crossfades into other programs of the time with its kind of folk horror leanings in some areas, like the Owl Service, Robin Redbreast, see here, what's it called? Redshift from the 1980s, and there's another one that I was going to mention. Oh yes, Pender's Fen, the strange TV film Pender's Fen from the 1975 by Alan Clark, which is a really weird and interesting kind of piece of folk horror, but I'm struggling to wrap my head around it. I would have said that particular one. But in my kind of course and what have you of reading the original M.R. James stories and what have you, found it really interesting generally, and to kind of get a kind of wider out immersion into his stories, because it kind of acts as enrichment to my favourite TV series of all time. And let's see here. And as I said, I've mainly found out about M.R. James thanks to this particular television series and what have you. Let's see, where's the spider's gone? I think it's all Daleks over there. Let's see. But in terms of kind of but generally reading the original stories by M.R. James has kind of acted as kind of enrichment for me to my favourite TV series of all time. and it's interesting to kind of have done that, I would have said, because I've had a kind of gotten a better grip on M.R. James, I would have said, his his works, and kind of gotten a new light, I would have said, on his particular stories. And in turn, over the time of me watching and enjoying the Ghost Story for Christmas TV films, I've kind of educated myself more on M.R. James and the kind of nature of his stories, I would have said, and what have you. And it's interesting for me to have done that, because I've kind of got a new way of viewing these particular installments and what have you, I would have said. In that I understand more about the nature of the stories, and kind of can talk about and kind of compare how, like, his, in comparisons to the author's original stories and what have you, which I find really interesting and what have you. So in terms of educating myself more on these, in terms of educating myself more on the television films and what have you present in this series, and what was I trying to say? In terms of kind of educating myself on what M.R. James's stories are like, in terms of the kind of tropes of them, and like what makes an M.R. James story an M.R. James story, kind of has kind of further enhanced my liking for these films, because they are very like the original stories in many ways. And and in that kind of new lens and what have you, I can kind of just discuss the but I can kind of now discuss the series in terms of more ways than one than I used to be able to, is what I'm trying to say with my rambling here. In that I can discuss them in more ways than one, and kind of can point to which ones I would have said are the most Jamesian out of all of them, as it were. And and I would have said that in terms of the ones that are the most M.R. James like, for me anyways at this point, would be The Stalls of Barchester and The Treasure of Abbot Thomas, because both of them really kind of most exemplify what M.R. James was like in terms of his stories, I would have said, in that he was very interested in antiques and what have you, and things of that nature, and in turn would craft his stories with that kind of fascination and interest in mind. in that a lot of his stories feature antiquities and elements of that nature, such as "O Whistle and I Will Come to You, My Lad" kind of features a whistle being unearthed, and the main protagonist of the story, Parkins, kind of finding the whistle, blowing on it, and kind of unleashing this supernatural force. So it's really interesting how I'm able to kind of view that, though these kind of episodes in that way now, because I can kind of more discuss them in terms of how they are, in terms of portrayals of M.R. James's stories, kind of compared to how I used to be able to talk to them in terms of the likes of, oh, these are really great in terms of such and such reason and such reason, just purely based in terms of the realms of what I think of them in terms of supernatural horror, television and media generally. So reading the stories like that has kind of given me a new light on this series, is what I'm overall trying to say here through my pathetic struggling. Which is really interesting, and the main reason why that I'm bringing this up and trying to introduce this into the live stream is that there are definitely ones, I would say now, in terms of episodes in this series, that I can see people liking more, in terms of just being a fan of supernatural horror generally. Like, if you're a fan of supernatural horror generally, I feel like that you would gravitate quite a bit towards the likes of A Warning to the Curious and The Signalman as perhaps being favourites of yours, but I would have said on the likes of perhaps The Treasure of Abbot Thomas, but particularly The Stalls of Barchester, I would have said that whereas you can definitely enjoy it in terms of a piece of supernatural horror media like that, I feel like the bigger fan you are of M.R. James, the more, and his original stories, the more that you will like this particular television film, I would have said, because there's certainly a lot of elements in it and what have you that are of that M.R. James cloth, as it were, kind of no pun intended if you've seen this particular film. But the overall kind of Jamesian air to the overall production is further accentuated by the location filming, which the overall series of A Ghost Story for Christmas often did. With it being shot at Norwich Cathedral and the cathedral close in the vicinity, and all of the little houses and residencies around the cathedral. Because M.R. James himself worked at Eton College and worked in churches a lot and in kind of similarly architectural places, I would have said, if I've got my kind of knowledge on all of that part of M.R. James correct, which I probably haven't because I'm an idiot. But that kind of part of it really enhances those bits and pieces of the M.R. James likeness to the overall story, I would have said. Why are there no mobs spawning? It's weird. And that's a rose, not a spider. That's a sheep still. But it's overall really interesting how the production and what have you kind of is enhanced more in terms of the MR James qualities, kind of like that, I would have said. The cameraman of the episode, John McGlashan, I think is how you pronounce it, looking at my notes, was able to make and add kind of a real atmosphere to this piece by making use of night shots in dark rooms and interiors of the buildings. That was used in the location filming, and they really help to kind of add to the overall air and atmosphere of the piece, and the overall horror in the overall episode is really incredible, and at times very unnerving and very like subtly done and what have you, I would have said. And it's absolutely fantastic how those kind of elements of the episode is kind of portrayed and what have you, I would have said. There are things below me somewhere. Let's see. Keep getting distracted here, but the horror in the overall piece is absolutely incredible, I would have said, and it can be very unnerving at times throughout the whole thing, I would have said. Like Dr. Black sensing that he is not alone in his residence and hearing the kind of whispers that I detailed earlier on in the live stream, and like all of the whispering and what have you that's kind of added to the piece is really well done and really amazing. And one particular kind of standout part of the horror, at least to me in my head now, is the kind of bit where he's alone at night in the place, in his place of residence, and there's like a voiceover, which is his voice in his head basically saying, I get something to the effect of, I get the sense that I am not alone. Something along the lines of, I'm not going to be able to remember the quote fully because I'm not smart, that he can sense that there is like movement without sound, as he describes it at one point, which is a really interesting and unsettling way to put it. And at times the piece can be very scary in areas. I would have had you all, what I would say can be considerably quite scary by some people, the overall piece, I would have said. Let's see, I forgot about that. And there's all sorts of interesting moments and what have you within the main run of the piece that I would consider quite frightening or unnerving in areas. Namely, another one that sticks out in mind is that there's a night scene in the production where he has a servant character fetch him a letter. It tells the servant character that he is gonna need to collect and deliver a letter from him in the morning, and to collect the letter in about an hour from his study. And there's an incredible scene just a couple minutes before set, during where it's a couple minutes before the servant character comes up and what have you to Dr. Black's office and study, that Black hears like whispering and movement outside of his study and what have you, and he thinks it's his friendly servant that I forget the name of. But then he kind of goes out the door and he's like, says the guy's name, "Is that you?" And then kind of looks around the corner, thinks he sees a shadow moving, and then his servant just comes around the corner and takes the lantern, goes down a hall, and then looks round the corner and then sees this kind of figure go from right to left into this dead-end alcove. It's a really simple piece of effects work by the production team, but it works so damn well, I would have said, and it's genuinely quite unnerving and scary, I would have said. Let's do that. And another particularly creepy or unsettling moment is the hooded figure that menaces Black near the end of the production. And whereas it's kind of, you possibly, if you look at it, you can kind of see some of the limitations of the piece, but I'm kind of happy to brush past that because I still think it is quite a scary image. The hooded, we see a bit at the end, which is ultimately the death of Dr. Black, where the hooded figure kind of manifests behind him, touches his shoulder with this really kind of greenish kind of clawed hand, which is a really interesting kind of bit of prop and kind of effect work from the department. He kind of quickly turns around and there's this really well done shot of him getting his face scratched and bloodied by this kind of clawed hand that we saw on his shoulder a minute ago, and then he ultimately collapses, falls down the stairs and dies. It's a very fascinating and really creepy and very well done bit of horror, I would have said, and it's absolutely fantastic overall, I would have said. And there's another interesting manifestation in the overall film, which is the kind of black cat that we see trotting about in his home, which is, as you guessed it, as I probably mentioned already, the other carving alongside the hooded figure in the cathedral. And it's interesting because he gets frightened every time it brushes past his leg, and he again asks his servant character at one point if we have, or if they have, a cat in their home, and they do not, which makes it all the more kind of creepy and unsettling, I would have said. And then you at times hear kind of phantom meows and what have you, which is really creepy and again quite unsettling. but overall the horror in this is absolutely incredible and very kind of unnerving and unsettling overall, I would have said. And a very interesting thing about the film is that at the very end, after Dr. Black has kind of concluded, is it Dr. Black? Do you not just I've been an idiot. Dr. Black is Clive Swift's character, isn't it? Archdeacon Haynes is the main character that I have miswritten that in my notes. Okay, so that's why. So the whole Archdeacon character I was just talking about is Archdeacon Haynes, not Dr. Black. Dr. Black is Clive Swift's character. That's a mistake on my part and in my notes, unfortunately. Good thing I noticed that, because I would look like an idiot otherwise, but I am an idiot anyways. But an interesting thing about this, and another quite odd moment, comes right at the end of the piece where Clive Swift's character, Dr. Black, has kind of concluded narrating the diary and what have you as found by that he was looking through, which is belonged to Archdeacon Haynes and his character. Is that he's walking across some grass and what have you from this kind of museum he goes to at the end, and then he turns around and stares at this kind of cat that's on the grass and what have you in one particular shot, and then just kind of walks on, a little bemused and unsettled that he has just seen a cat after hearing about all of these strange things to do with a cat in Archdeacon Haynes's diary and what have you. So I imagine it was some kind of intentional thing done by the production crew, just as a little interesting anecdote to the overall piece. See here, but find it interesting that they did that, and it's an interesting little tidbit they put into the very end of the production. As for my kind of overall thoughts on the Stalls of Barchester film that I've tried to make the main subject of this stream, I think it's absolutely incredible, and like with the majority of the Ghost Story for Christmas films in the 1970s run, I do personally give it full marks and a 10 out of 10. I think it's an absolutely incredible little film. And whereas I didn't get it completely like right away, it took me a couple watches to fully appreciate and get what it was going for. I think it is still an absolutely incredible little short film. That's what I want to do. There we are. But I do think it's an incredible film overall, and as I said, I feel like if you're more in tune with the original stories by M.R. James, you will probably appreciate this a bit more. And if you're more of a general kind of fan of supernatural horror, generally I would say you probably would gravitate more towards other installments of this particular series. But overall I think it's an absolutely incredible short film, very scary and frightening in areas, and is a fantastic way to start the series. And I am aware that from Head Press Publishing that there is going to be some kind of a book fully about the Ghost Story for Christmas television series, and fully going in depth with it and what have you, which I cannot wait for, and I believe that's coming out at some point this year. Do that. And so I cannot wait for that book to come out and for me to kind of pore over it and kind of fanboy over it, because it's just going to be absolutely fascinating to learn more about what is my favourite television series of all time, and to find out more about this particular TV series and what went into the overall productions that were a part of the series. And that's the thing, and that's why I'm kind of trying to draw a conclusion to this kind of arc I've had discussing M.R. James and what have you, and his adaptations in the live streams that I have done thus far. In that, how I like to discuss M.R. James at the moment is more for a familiarity with the overall television adaptations of his particular stories and what have you. And that's how I like to discuss them, but unfortunately out there, until this book comes out, there's no real major kind of academical thing that I can comb through, make notes on, and then have more points and pieces and what have you to discuss, which I feel like is kind of quite important for documentary videos and what have you, to fully have a breadth of knowledge on these kind of things in easy to access form right in front of you, because it makes these documentaries and what have you that you can make about these shows and things you discuss about them all the more kind of easier, what have you, to, you know, talk about, because I can learn a lot about the production of the Stalls of Barchester film, for example, from the book on the show, and and then I can make notes about it and find it more interesting things to kind of discuss within it and what have you. Whereas with the way it is at the moment, I can only kind of go upon what there is in DVD booklets and what I'm able to find out about it online, which isn't exactly comprehensive. So I feel like I'm going to wrap up and kind of conclude my discussions and what have you on M.R. James ghost stories and what have you in terms of live stream content for now, because at this point I can kind of, you know, talk about the films and what have you in the ways that I have been in live streams, but I feel like I'll be able to enhance and talk about them much more, I guess you could say, intellectually, and have much more to kind of talk about in streams and what have you, if I was to have such materials kind of presented to me and what have you. But I don't really have that, unfortunately, so things like Out of the Unknown are probably going to be a TV show that would be a bit easier to discuss for me in live stream format such as this, because I've got a breadth of knowledge there on that show thanks to Mark Ward's book, and I can easily identify interesting talking points and what have you in regards to that series quite easily, because I have a full book on that show. And then there's other things and what have you that I could discuss in terms of shows, like late night horror, for example. I could easily probably do a full live stream discussing that and kind of using what I wrote and discussed in my 2-part review on the book of the show in a full stream. I could easily use that as content for a live stream, for example. And I'm also thinking of possibly doing more live streams and what have you, discussing the TV series The Avengers from the 60s, possibly, namely the surviving episodes of series 1, and then using the big book I have on that show to kind of help expand myself in terms of knowledge and talking points and what have you within streams, using that. But that's the kind of thing. There would be many TV shows like that and what have you that I would like to discuss fully, but I just simply don't have access to in-depth academical information on these shows, like late night horror, no, not late night horror, mystery and imagination. I'd love to do more kind of documentary style videos on mystery and imagination. I think I said late night horror twice there. I think I'd love to do more videos and what have you on mystery and imagination on my YouTube documentary series and what have you, but I just simply don't have enough information available to me on it. And I think that's kind of why, and that is why I kind of have settled upon doing documentaries on Out of the Unknown for my documentary YouTube channel at the moment, because I have a full book on that show and I can easily make documentaries and what have you from that book and what have you quite easily. So I think overall I'm going to kind of conclude my discussions and what have you on A Ghost Story for Christmas and MR James things kind of here in terms of contents for live streams and what have you, because getting all of this together to discuss and what have you hasn't been the easiest. But it's been interesting and I've enjoyed doing so, kind of rambling on quite a lot about my love for these MR James things and what have you, but I feel like it would be beneficial and easier for me to kind of discuss things in which I'd have more information on readily available and much easier for information and what have you. But overall I have really enjoyed it, and kind of trying to go back into my main narrative and frame of discussion for this live stream. I thoroughly enjoy The Stalls of Barchester, 1971 TV film overall, and I think it's an absolutely incredible way to start the series, but I can see in some areas how people would prefer other films kind of over it and what have you in some ways. But it is fantastic, I would have said, and what have you, and I do absolutely thoroughly enjoy it. In terms of asking me the question, if somebody was to kind of come up to me and ask the question, do I believe in ghosts, as a general kind of topic and what have you, I would say that I would say they are possible and what have you. And one of the reasonings why I think they are possible is the following. Even though I am particularly not a religious person and what have you, my kind of look on ghosts is kind of based on that, in the sense that a lot of people in this world are very religiously inclined and have heavy religious beliefs, and that overall has to do a lot with spirituality, and so does ghosts. So on my kind of end, I think with the heavy element of religion in this world, which in of itself is a very spiritual thing, with many people believing in gods and these kinds of things, I don't see it in terms of that context that it's completely out of reasonability, given that context, that ghosts exist and what have you, or are a thing, because they are also a very spiritually inclined thing, like religion and the idea and belief of there being a god. And that kind of leads to an interesting synergy that churches and supernatural dealings have for me, and that's why I kind of find telling a ghost story in a church to be kind of fascinating, because there's that kind of synergy and for lack of a better word, synergy and kind of parallelism that there is to be had there. Now you've got these kind of crossings of these two big areas of spirituality together, and not to mention that a lot of churches and what have you have graveyards in them, which are naturally very inclined, and which are definitely one thing that will get brought up a lot in terms of people discussing the paranormal, for obvious reasons. So I find it really interesting that there's this kind of duality and synergy of believing in ghosts and what have you, or having a ghost story being told in a church, I would have said. And I find it really interesting to have a ghost story in a church, and kind of continuing with that and rolling into another bit here that is relevant. I am a big fan of ghost stories generally, as you would expect and what have you, and I am also in turn fans of the videos of like Nuke's Top 5 and Slapped Ham on YouTube, even though I haven't watched Slapped Ham in quite a long time. Same with Nuke's Top 5, but there's that, but it still kind of falls under the same category. I'm kind of interested in watching those videos and what have you still, not because I 100% believe everything in those videos. I think that's stupid. I think you've got to have some kind of voice in the back of your head that says, oh, take this with a grain of salt, this could be real, it could be fake. And there are definitely some videos prevalent in Nuke's Top 5, because that's what I'm more familiar with in terms of the two examples that I brought up there with Nuke and Slapped Ham. There are definitely clips in it and what have you, Nuke's Top 5 videos, that could definitely be faked and what have you. There is no doubt about it. But what I am watching these videos more for is the stories that are prevalent in these videos, more than actual evidence for the paranormal and ghosts, I would have said, because to me I find that the most kind of fascinating aspect and what have you, like where Nuke would showcase a particular clip and what have you from a particular supposed legitimate ghost hunt and what have you, and and would kind of discuss the history of the area and what have you that this supposed true ghost hunt is taking place in, and kind of knit that into showing the clip for this, from this particular supposed ghost hunt of this area he is just given the history on, and kind of weaves that all together as like one kind of story for me. And that's kind of the interesting part about these videos and what have you for me, I would have said, and is the most fascinating part about it, not the whole investigation into the paranormal aspect, but the stories that these videos are presenting to a viewer like me. That's the most interesting and fascinating part to these for me. And sometimes I'll definitely watch these kinds of videos for that, for a good kind of alternative way of experiencing a ghost story. I've just realised I've gone out of range of my turtle, that's unfortunate. But kind of spiralling into that and going more into that and discussing putting everything together and coming together full circle in this live stream, is that I've watched one such video, paranormal investigation that is, last night for the second time now. And there was a video by Ghost Tech Paranormal on YouTube, which was a investigation of the Bedham Mission Church somewhere in England. I'm not 100% sure where exactly. But somewhere in England, and it's a really interesting and fascinating video for me in terms of a story with the history of the location and what have you, that is kind of very much off the beaten path and is just randomly located in the middle of these woods, kind of cut off from the rest of civilization, as it were. And the whole kind of history around that and what went on in the building itself is also really interesting. I would have said. No, he's still going, that's good. Any silver down here? No, it's tin. So like with Bedlam Mission Church, it was acted as both a school and as a church as well. So during the weekdays they would have it as a school for kids and what have you, and then they would clear away all of the kind of school stuff and make way for churchgoers and what have you at the weekend, which I find a really interesting kind of bit of history behind the building as a whole. And the kind of supposed supernatural activity the team encounter in the building and the ruins rather, because it's been graffitied and the roof got blown off during a hurricane at some point, from what they detail. And the supposed activity they encounter in the ruins is really interesting and what have you, and kind of further adds to the overall story that this overall kind of faux ghost story that the overall video kind of is for me. Pardon me. And I find it really interesting that it kind of all acts like that in turn, or kind of the supposed true ghost activity that they catch on camera is, I find, really interesting, or kind of really helps to add to the overall story that the thing is for me. Such as apparitions and things are heard and seen in their investigation. Like they see a shadow figure go between two of the investigators at one point, and that's caught on camera, and then another one of them hears children's voices, and that's also captured on camera as well. And then there's also one of them having the sensation of being touched, which is really creepy and what have you. It all just kind of comes together and coalesces together in this really interesting kind of faux ghost story, I would have said. And really interesting overall, I would have said. And but yeah, those are the kind of main general bits I wanted to discuss in the course of this live stream and what have you. I didn't get quite everything I wanted to do done today because I haven't found silver yet in this world, which is important for making sag mills and for making a sieve and what have you. But I feel like I've made good progression in this world here today, and will reconvene in it soon, and I will make more progress and what have you in this world next stream, and hopefully we'll get some silver by then, and we'll have more developments to make in this world. As I said, I'm kind of at the moment generally working on the base of this world, but I will kind of expand outwards and what have you, and make more and start building the city that I have planned in mind for this particular world. But like, favorite, comment, subscribe to whoever may be watching this live stream. Thank you very much for tuning in and listening to me ramble on about ghost stories and what have you for however long it's been, for the past hour and a bit, 2 hours. So like, favorite, comment, subscribe. I hope you guys enjoyed this live stream, and goodbye.